we're talking, you just, me and you.
Okay.
And we're going to have a video that, we're going to watch on that screen, and you can comment.
Okay.
Welcome to Unleashed. Today we've got a guest. His name is Mr. R, and he is our rugby coach and French 3. How you doing today?
Good.
So we gathered some students that have taken your classes, and we got their opinions on how you drive them to do better in what you give them, and we can take a look at that.
Coach R has a different way of coaching. He kind of tells us, he leads us and lets us lead ourselves, and he'll say what he expects from us, but at the end he asks us what he expects us to do from ourselves. So in a way, he kind of lets us drive, and it gives us motivation to do our best. And then, yeah.
He does several things as a coach and as a teacher. He's always pushed me to do my best. He's always in your ear, kind of, but not in a bad way. He's very encouraging. He doesn't single you out. He makes you feel like you're a part of it, which is the whole point of our sport, I guess, to include everybody. And having him in class and as a coach, he's always been very supportive. He's always listened and given me advice when I needed it. So I would consider him very supportive and very driving in the class setting and our sport.
He's very motivational in class, and he really pushes us to work hard and to do hard. And he has generally high expectations of us, and when he gives us work, he expects us to do well, and that kind of motivates you to do better than what you would expect of yourself, because when other people expect higher of you, you expect higher of yourself. And he's very good at just overall pushing us to succeed, and I think that's the most,
Coach R is very motivational. He's a lot for motivational speaking, and he's very confident. He keeps your confidence, and he makes sure you don't get behind, and he pushes you forward. And it's very influential for a lot of people, and definitely for one myself.
With all that being said, I think you're a very motivational person.
I don't know about that, but okay.
I mean, it feels like everybody else could disagree with that, but so teaching, you teach French. How do you know, how'd you get into that?
Oh, it was never my life goal to be a teacher. I went to college to be a broadcast communication major, and then after a year I ran out of money and transferred to the University of Kentucky. I was in a private Christian school called Asbury University, transferred to Kentucky, and I had to choose a major, but I was an Army ROTC cadet, and I was going to be an officer. Mm-hmm. So I chose French. Well, years later, I left the Army and went to a school in Africa to be a coach, a boarding parent, and some other stuff, other roles. And then one day they go, pray with us, we need a French teacher. And I went up to the superintendent and I go, sir, do you ever read your staff members' bios? And he's like, actually, I've not read yours. And I went, oh, okay. If you had, you would see that I have a bachelor's degree in French language. And so from that point on, I became the French teacher at that school, and that's how it started.
So Morgan County, though, why Morgan County?
Well, honestly, because it was the one school that offered me a job.
Really?
Yeah, when I applied, my daughter said in 2018, she said, Dad, I want you back in the States. So we decided to come back to the States. There were a lot of issues for that. So at 2018, I started the application process, 51 applications to 51 different schools and school districts, and this is the first one that gave me a job opportunity.
And I actually didn't expect that. I mean, from what I hear, as soon as you got the job, it was just like, okay, we're on the way.
Yeah, well, they offered it to me. I was still in Kenya. My interview was actually over Skype, and it dropped 5 times in the interview. So we never totally got through the interview, and somehow they still hired me. Of course, we're doing it 8,000 miles away, apart from each other. But then I said, no, I'm not going to say yes yet. Came back to the States for a break we had, like our spring break, and I wanted to do some interviews. Those fell through, and then I committed to the school. And that was it, April 2018.
So, what is your favorite French class?
My favorite French class? You know, I can't answer that question.
I knew you were going to say that. Come on. I mean, you know, your French 3's got 2 students in it.
My favorite French class doesn't exist yet.
Doesn't exist yet?
Doesn't exist yet.
Well,
my favorite French class would be AP French.
AP French?
We get to talk about deep, relevant issues. We get to talk about art, history. We get to talk about architecture and all this different stuff in a deep, meaningful way, because they already have a foundation in the language, and we haven't gotten there yet. But I've taught that for 11 years, so I'm ready for that to come back and bring it here, and then we can do the same thing.
Definitely seems like you. But your French 3 class, only 2 kids in it. How do you handle that class?
With flexibility. Life right now it requires that of you. So when I look at that, if one of them's out, I got to still do the lesson. So I have to make sure things are online on Google Classroom for them very clearly, so they can keep up with things.
I mean, personally, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but personally, I mean, with a 2-student class, that to me, if I was a teacher, I mean, that would be fine with me. I don't know about you, but
I think the sweet number is really 10, 12 for a language class.
Yeah, I mean,
so that's the sweet spot. You don't want to be too much less than that with 2. It gives me some unique opportunities, though. We can individualize stuff. They have some, and their final exam is actually like a project presentation, so they will be able to individualize that more, and it's all about art. So I'll be able to give them some more one-on-one instruction and guidance that I can't do with like my second period class, French 2, is 25. So I can't quite do that with 25.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. I mean, I'm in Spanish right now, and there's 6 kids in my class. It just doesn't really work out. But rugby. What is rugby?
All right, let's give a history lesson real quick. The original sport, the Celts used to kick the skulls of their opponents or adversaries. They would kick them around and would play a game with them. Over time, that became what's known today as soccer, or what's actually in the rest of the world is known as football.
Yep.
So that turned into soccer over the centuries. And then in 1823, a young man in Scotland decided to pick up the football, the soccer ball, and run it into the goal. Well, there were no rules against that. So that started the division, and from that, rugby was born. Now, from rugby, later on came what we now know as American football. So when you think about it, soccer is like the grandfather, okay? And then you've got rugby as the father, and then you've got the child as American football. So it's 3 different things. These 3 sports all have similarities, and they all have differences.
Yeah.
So some people would like to describe it as soccer football to Americans, because you can kick, and yet you carry, and then for a touchdown, we call it a try in rugby, you actually touch it down to the ground.
Rugby, it's weird to me, you know. I mean, it's very unique. I very much appreciate. I mean, I've never been to a practice. I apologize for that. Also, I know that got out of whack, but I mean, me and Noel, you know, we were at his house one day, and he's like, you know, if you're really serious about playing rugby, I could teach you, you know, some of the things that we do in rugby that, you know, you would be expected to do, like tackling and how you pass.
Yep.
And passing, the way he told me to pass, I was, huh?
Yeah, it's sideways, lateral. It's a 2-hand lateral. It's not a push pass or shovel pass. It can do that, but that's not recommended, because you want the ball to be easily accepted or received.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a bit different. But rugby is one of those sports that's an international sport. I mean, truly international. So you're looking at countries there's competitions with 30, 40 countries that play together.
Yeah.
So this is a sport that has long arms. If you get it, if you have a desire to be an international type person, this would actually get you. Say, oh, I played rugby when I was in high school. These guys in France would be like, oh, I played rugby. You know, you'd have a connection.
Yeah.
And that's brought me a lot of connections that you never would expect.
Of course.
So,
I mean, you know, as much as you've done with rugby, as much as you know, how long have you been coaching for with rugby?
I've been coaching since 06. There are 2 years in there where I didn't because I'm in the States. But I've been coaching since 06. I was in a previous school where we had a program that went from U12 all the way to varsity, U19. And I coached the under 14 for 2 years. I coached the under 15, under 17 JV for 4 years. And then I coached the varsity under 19 team for 4 years as well.
Wow. So
it's it was a full program, like we have football in our county. That school had the same thing.
Yeah.
So
you're very knowledgeable in rugby, I can see. You know, all the history facts you've given me. How do you know rugby that well?
it's a way of life. It's not just a sport you do. That's something to really consider when people get into it, because you got to play when you're hurting. You got to play when you're not. You never play when you're not hurting, frankly. But it's something that you build a brotherhood, or if it's ladies, a sisterhood.
Yeah.
Because it's the one sport that I know of that has the true idea built in with it of unity. Because the unity of effort, without that player, there's gaps, there's something's missing. You've got to support each other. You got to pass. Everyone has to be able to receive. It's not like you're going to have a great star who's going to do everything or be good for the team. It's you've got to be together, and that's the greatest thing about it is it brings people.
Everything is teamwork.
Teamwork is the main thing. Support, etc.
Yeah. So you a couple of your students started the rugby club, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So did you throw up ideas to them or something?
Not intentionally. I told them that I had been a rugby coach in Africa, and I had left all of my kit, all my stuff there, and I had no intention of coaching here. But then I showed the guys in my French 3 class that first semester some sevens games from the World Series sevens, and they were watching these international players, and they were like, Mr. R, I think we can do that. I said, okay. And then it turned into, Mr. R, we want to do that.
Yeah.
So then they got permission from the AD, from Mr. Connolly, and also from our principal, Dr. Edwards, and the rest is history.
Have you gotten any awards for anything?
Not here, not with this program.
What about back?
In Kenya, yes. I was very successful as a coach. I was 41-11 as a varsity coach. We were in the Prescott Cup final twice of 4 years. We had won the Black Rock tournament once and was second once. We had won the Hillcrest Sevens tournament 3 times out of 4. My teams were very successful. But for them, it was like, that was their life.
Yeah.
I mean, my guys there played basketball and soccer, possibly, but rugby was the one sport they really looked forward to playing. And with the Prescott Cup that I mentioned, that we were twice in the final, we never won it. That's like the elite league in the country in Kenya. So we were like, it wasn't technically number 2, but it was almost like you were number 2, because only the best teams were in that league.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, aside from the rugby talk, back on just Morgan County, how did you end up here, though?
Well, like I just said, I put out 51 applications, and then I get this email from Dr. Edwards out of the blue, and she's like, hey, we'd like to interview you. I was like, okay. But see, Georgia, and this is truly how it happened, is I took a map of the United States, and I said, okay, 6 hours driving it was Google Maps, I think it was, and I took 6 hours driving from where my mother-in-law lives and 6 hours driving from where my dad lives, and we made a big circle and said, this is the zone that we want to be, because as they get older, we want to be that close to them. And so we applied to all these schools, and there we go. I mean, I did my last 3 years of high school in DeKalb County, so Georgia is sort of home. My girls were born in Georgia, so we wanted to be in Georgia anyhow.
Yeah, I mean, that's understandable. How long have you worked here?
Since July 2018. Same time with Mr. White. He
was telling me about that. Same time as him. You know, I feel like he's losing his memory a little bit more than you, because he thought it was about 5 years ago. Anyways, so have you done any other teaching?
Yes, I've taught at the university level for 2 years at Asbury University. Taught French. I taught English, actually, funny to say, for Central Texas College when I was in the Army. We would do deployments overseas, and then they'd offer free college courses for soldiers, and then I got to teach English comp.
No, you mentioned the Army. How long did you serve?
11 years between active duty and reserves.
Wow.
So 3 years reserves, just 3.5, not quite 3.5, and then almost 8 years on active duty as an officer.
And what branch was that?
It's the Army, but when I was enlisted, I was in a engineer unit, and then when I became an officer, I was a military intelligence officer. So I traveled all over the world.
So why did you join the Army?
Well, it's a very fitting lifestyle for me. I liked what they had to offer. They also offered me a great scholarship at the University of Kentucky, so I didn't have to pay for school. But at the same time, I was thinking of family, serving. I had made a commitment when the Rwanda genocide had happened, and I was a teenager. I had made a commitment that I wouldn't let something like that happen again. So what was the way to do that? Was to join the military. And I had dreams of always being an Air Force officer, but then I started having eye issues. And so that disqualified me, and then I joined the Army. And the rest is history.
I like that. What skills did you pick up from, being in the Army, as long as you were?
Well, when I was an engineer, I was an electrician. So I was a lineman, so I would get up on the big poles and work on the big power lines.
Yeah.
Then I moved to interior electricity, worked some carpentry. From that point on, I moved to becoming an officer. So as a military intelligence guy, I was trained in signals intelligence and had some training in imagery intelligence, like the satellite stuff on both sides there. But what I really did in my daily work, particularly when I was in Bosnia, was what we call human intelligence and counterintelligence. So we would run sources, we would get information, we'd do lots of stuff.
You have done a lot.
Yeah, we've done a lot.
So, the Army, how has that influenced your daily life?
Well, it has, in lots of ways. It provided for our family. So, having my family, my girls were born on Fort Stewart. It's made me have a better perspective on different things in life. There's some negative things, of course, that come, but I loved the military, and there's times when I still think of, man, what if I'd still been in the military? Because I didn't leave it because I was unhappy with it, or that they chaptered me out, or they kicked me out, or anything like that. That's not why I left it. I left it because I felt God wanted me to go to Kenya and serve in the school. So that was a big change for me. But at the same time, it's given me a sense of purpose. It allows me to say purpose, leadership. I think some of the stuff these guys talked about in the podcast about being a positive leader comes from that.
Yeah.
I think try to motivate people, I think it comes from, because it's different. I won't tell them, oh, you're wrong. That's not motivating.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, what's the next picture? What's the next thing you're going to do? How are we going to take one thing and let's improve on that one thing? And that came from the military side a bit.
I honestly think that's the best way to be. If you're trying to teach somebody something, you can't push too much on them and just expect them, and if they don't do it, you just, just so much on them. But, you know, do you have any, like, memories that you could talk about
From the military?
from the military?
I shared one in class the other day. It's rather embarrassing. Well, I know everybody, I don't know if you call it pecan or pecan. My family calls it pecan pie. Well, my mama decided when I was in Kuwait in 1998 that she was going to send me a pecan pie. It was one of those Savannah sweet shop, you know, very expensive sort of pecan pies. And I'm sure other people know what I mean by that. And she put it in this little box and sent it through the mail. And when it arrived, it was in probably 1,000 pieces. So me and all the soldiers, all my soldiers that were in my unit with me, they all got their MRE spoon. We always kept an MRE spoon in our pocket right here on the breast pocket, and we would take it out, and we all ate the pecan pie with that. And in that same deployment, I wrecked my battalion commander's tank in a training exercise. I actually was commanding it, and I had the driver drive it into an Iraqi trench line, an old Iraqi trench line. So here's this tank looking up and down like this. It's at a 30, 40 degree angle, and the turret is all, the hydraulics are all torn to shreds, and hydraulic fluids all over the place. And I had to medevac my gunner, had to medevac the driver. And I got the biggest butt chewing I have ever had in my life. But I look at those experiences, and I go, hey, I could talk about, you know, glory times, but those are the funny times. And those are some of those memories you can share, and you're like, yeah, we're human.
That's fun.
We're human.
Seemed like you had a lot of fun in the military.
I did. I got to visit lots of countries. So I got to have a month in Hawaii, paid by the Army. You know, I got to go to Korea, Japan, Hungary, Bosnia, Kuwait, Iraq. Lots of places I got to see.
I mean, in any of those, you know, places you went, is that somehow how you ended up in Kenya, maybe?
Not really. I mean, when I was a kid, I was in Kenya at the same school. And I had sworn I would never return. I was like, that's not me. And I think God had a different plan.
Yeah.
So, actually, I was actually in Kuwait in 2003, and the invasion was about to start. And I was working in the big command center as a battle captain for the C2, the intelligence cell, and really unique opportunity to see the whole battle on the ground and the air from that perspective, and be part of that planning and executing of it. But so I get there, and I'm still able to sneak emails home.
Yeah.
Every now and then. And so my wife and I were praying about it and thinking about it, and then while I was there, we both came to the same conclusion, that we were to go to this school. And so it's neat how sometimes things like that happen. But
what was the culture like in Kenya?
Kenyans are very warm, friendly, loving people. Your neighbor is truly your neighbor. You are connected to each other. I mean, when you have a medical bill, you go to your neighbor, and your neighbor might give you $10, and you go to your next neighbor, give you $10, and they'll give you keep going around, and they just work together. They have this concept called harambe, which means it's about being together as one. And now, their culture, lots of music, food's different.
Of course.
They like to eat goat and chicken. And eat things that are more like mush or sticky grits. We call it ugali. A flatbread called chapati. And non-Indian food is a big thing in Kenya. So to try to sum them up in one word is impossible. But I would say to say that what Kenya is a warm, welcoming place.
Of course. So, I mean, compared to America, how different is Kenya from here?
Well, the biggest difference, I could give you the perspective of my niece when she came to visit in 2013.
Okay.
Emily, she arrived at night. We drove. She didn't know couldn't see anything because we drove at night to our house, which is an hour and a half away. The next morning we get up and we drive around, and people walk everywhere. You don't just drive to the store. You walk everywhere. So people were lining the roads as the cars were going in between them. And she was just shocked. And then we took her out to eat after we visited a refugee camp that we were partnering with in a little bit away. And we took her out to eat, and they brought nyama choma, which is goat meat. It's been grilled, basically, straight over fire, no seasoning. Mr. White wouldn't like that. He likes to have his rub and all that stuff. But so you put the meat right on the fire, right? Well, they bring it and they laid it out on this piece of wood, this board, and it had this big thing of goat, this thing of ugali, this mush-looking thing, and then a pile of salt. And she looked at it, and she was like, I don't know if I'm going to eat this. Well, she ate the goat. And you're supposed to take the goat in pieces and dip it in your salt and eat it.
Yeah.
But she didn't touch the ugali. It's like grits. That's hardened. She didn't touch it. She was like, I don't know about that. But, yeah. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah. I mean, any answer is better than none, right? I mean, but living in Kenya for as long as you did, do you know any Swahili?
I do. Yep.
Wow. What was the process of learning that?
Part of it was somewhat as a kid, getting to use a little bit of it. I lived at the Kipsigis tribe, so it was a bit weird between that because they use a different language. But the Kiswahili is actually not a hard language to learn in some ways, but getting to know people, and even just getting to ask them, okay, I want to say this, they tell you this happened, I expand upon it, and you build relationship that way, and you're using it daily.
Wow.
So,
how was teaching there? I mean, I know I don't know, it's probably different from here, but...
Well, the school I was in was of the same caliber as this school.
Really? It's the same thing?
Whiteboards, projectors, screens. Every student had a computer. So a lot of it's the same. We had internet half the time. Only when the system completely went down. But Kenyan schools are very different. Kenyan schools are more of what we call rote memory type schools. You don't get to explore and discover. In education, it's like, this is the information, memorize it, regurgitate it. And their schools often are, particularly in the area we lived in, were tin buildings with some cement walls.
Yeah.
And maybe a blackboard, if they had that. And the kids all sat on benches, wooden benches that, were not comfortable. But they would sit there from 7 a.m. until 5 p.m. because they wanted to learn. So
I can say it's different than here then, just a little bit. But living there had to be a little different. How different?
The way you get your food, you can't just go to the grocery store. We would grow stuff, buy things right from the farmer all the time. There was a market in our community. We would go down there, and that's how we bought our vegetables and stuff. Walking everywhere when you could. Public transport, very different. No MARTA. No nice buses. There's buses galore. And there's minivans going around that might not have floorboards in them.
Wow.
But they will take you places. And so it's a very different experience, but at the same time, you're like, hey, it's sometimes freer in some ways.
Yeah.
So.
Do you plan on vacationing there or moving back anytime soon?
We have no plans to move back. I mean, this is our home now. But vacationing, we do miss our Kenyan friends. And that school, we've been invited back to help sub. They have a term that's during our summer, and they've invited us back. We haven't said we're going to take that up, but I would always love to go back because there's a special place. If you think about it, 11 years as an adult, almost 7 years as a kid, I've got almost 18 years in Kenya. So there's a place in my heart for that.
Of course. No, I understand. Yeah.
Hey, I'm David. Yeah, ask him about nature. I think it's a pretty fascinating place.
Nature. Okay. What is the strangest place that you have answered nature's call?
The strangest place is at a place, its name is actually called Escarpment. Okay? And it's on the highway that goes from Nairobi to the town we lived in Kijabe, almost near this little town called Lari.
Yeah.
Well, they have this drop-off. It's an escarpment, okay? Well, a dude has built an outhouse that sits up on there, and you can open the door, and you're overlooking the Great Rift Valley. If you know what the Great Rift Valley looks like, it's an immense geological structure.
Yeah.
But you look down, it's 1,000 feet down below you. So you're sitting there doing your business, and there's a little curio shop there. That's why he says the only toilet from Nairobi to wherever.
Yeah.
So you can stop there, buy some carvings or whatever, and you can use the toilet. There's no water, of course, and you can open the door and overlook the Great Rift Valley. That was probably the weirdest, most unique place that I can talk about.
Seems like the scariest
I
blessing.
can't talk about some of the other ones from the Army. So.
Yeah, that's fine. So what do you do in your free time? Any like hobbies do you have?
Gardening. Walking with my wife. We love to walk. Yeah. And love watching movies. So.
Yeah. I mean, hobbies I've picked up. I mean, I started skateboarding. I mean, I don't know if you've ever skateboarded, but skateboarding wasn't as hard as I thought it was. I just got on a little hill, got on the skateboard, just went off.
Sorry. I think I need some water.
Okay.
I think I need some water or something. Jeez.
Some water?
Yeah. Go ahead.
How has your life impacted by everything you've done in your past?
I can't answer the question.
Can we get him some water?
Man. Oh, Gatorade, huh? All right. Ask it again.
All right. How has your life been impacted by everything you've done in your past?
Well, I see my voice will come back.
There we go.
The textbook answer would be, everything you do in life impacts your life. Every choice you make has a positive or negative consequence. I mean, every choice. Mm-hmm. So, if you're asking more about the Army, it's had major impacts on my life. I have had some PTSD. It's not that big an issue right now, but it was in the past.
Yeah.
Living in Africa and growing up there for my younger years has made me see the world in a completely different scenario.
Of course.
I mean, I think I value things differently. Mm-hmm. If I hadn't traveled to 21 different nations in my lifetime, I wouldn't have the worldview perspective that I have of people and of what's important. So I think doing all those going to all those places, being with all these different people, learning languages, learning cultures, has made me what we call a third culture person. And there's a common term out there, TCK, third culture kid. It means I don't really fit in my home culture. I don't really fit in the culture where I live. I'm somewhere caught in between. And that's sort of who I am.
Yeah.
I'm a third culture adult.
And I got to say, after all of this, I really respect the way you've lived your life. I think, you've done a lot. And I do plan on playing rugby next year.
Okay.
So as soon as, I get my arm better. But we've got
some more people out there that could.
Yeah, we definitely do. Sean, Joe, maybe. But there's something we like to do at the end of our podcast.
Okay.
What would you like this show to be called?
Oh, goodness.
Yeah, a lot of pressure.
You mean your general show?
This
or just this podcast? Oh, man. Life of a Weird American.
Life of a Weird American. I like it.
Life of a Weird American.
Thank you. Glad that we got to do this. I got to know a lot about you, but yeah, I think we're good. Yeah.
All right, cool.